Hi everyone, today I'll be watching why this stupid cat, Incineroar, is the best Pokemon ever. Hi, I'm Maple. I like Pokemon. I do Super Kaizo Ironmon because I'm crazy, and then I will dabble in the occasional Soul Link and Nuzlocke. Yeah, hi. I have watched the second best Pokemon for the starter, but this one was in the recommendation. This one isn't like starters, it's just best Pokemon ever. And we kind of already know Incineroar is kind of the best competitive Pokemon ever because he always jump scares Wolfie in every single video I've watched so far. So, let's just watch the video about that cat. Alright, I'm gonna go to the react corner now, and I'm excited to watch this with you guys. Bleh.
If you haven't played a Pokemon game in a while and somebody asked
For gore, hold up, there's this box in the way. Okay, now we continue.
you what you thought the best Pokemon of all time was, you'd probably say something like Mewtwo. If you've played a decent amount of Pokemon over the last 2 decades, you might say something like Groudon or Kyogre.
Yeah, I want to say, when you actually use Mewtwo in game and that kind of stuff, because I've mentioned like literally in the first couple of seconds of this video that I dabbled in the occasional Nuzlocke, and that tends to be randomized stuff, right? Getting Mewtwo early on is really fucking bad. Like, hold up, I'll put like a screenshot of the level up moveset. So let's just say we get like Mewtwo in Gen 5. So in Black and White, Mewtwo, if you get Mewtwo, let's just say at like level 5, he gets Barrier, Confusion, and Disable. But note that he actually doesn't learn Psychic. The best move that you could have on your Psychic type Pokemon, because it is a 90 power, 100 accuracy stab move. Mewtwo doesn't naturally learn that until level 64, and if you're playing hardcore Nuzlocke rules, then you're never getting Psychic unless you pick it up randomized via TM. It kind of sucks, but Mewtwo is cool, so I give him the pass. But like in terms of like using him for a hardcore Nuzlocke, kind of sucks.
Pokemon over the last 2 decades, you might say something like Groudon or Kyogre.
Okay, but like Kyogre is actually crazy for randomized Nuzlockes because he actually starts out with really, really good moves. So like Kyogre, I remember it was I believe I was doing a Gen 4 Souling, and the thing is, Kyogre is like moveset in Platinum. Starts out with Water Pulse, which is like already a 60 power move and can cause confusion. But then at level 35, bro gets like Ice Beam naturally, and it's awesome.
If you consider yourself more than a casual fan, you'd probably answer something like Mega Rayquaza or...
I say Mega Rayquaza because he's cool. And I also built a figure kit of Mega Rayquaza recently. I was supposed to build like one of regular ass Rayquaza as well. But okay, so the story is I actually bought the Mega Rayquaza kit from like one trip in Japan, but in the Japan trip before that one, I had bought the regular Rayquaza kit. And I didn't build them because I was like, I will get to this later, and I forgot, and that's why I have both the Mega Rayquaza and the regular Rayquaza figure kit. Wow.
But if you've played a ton of Pokemon, you'd know the answer is obvious because it isn't really even up for debate. The best Pokemon ever is Incineroar.
That's the cat!
Some of you may be confused. Incineroar? The starter from Alola? The Smash Bros. Ultimate character? The thing that haunts my nightmares?
I keep forgetting that bro's in like Smash.
Yes. The thing is, what makes Incineroar the best Pokemon ever isn't immediately obvious. It doesn't have stats that make Mewtwo look like Flittle. It doesn't have some stupid signature ability. It doesn't have a move that made me throw up the first time I saw it, or any one utterly broken tool that makes it game-breaking.
Behemoth Blade is so good, bro. 100 base power, 100 accuracy.
The first time I saw it, or any one utterly broken tool that makes it game-breaking. How could it possibly be stronger than all-time great Pokemon like Kyogre, Mega Rayquaza, or Screamtail? Huh, that's a really good list. I bet whoever made it is like super good looking. Well, to understand what makes Incineroar so strong, we have to get our hands dirty. For the full picture, it's going to take some digging. Today, I want to talk about why Incineroar is the best Pokemon ever made. To do this, we need to start at the beginning. Not the beginning of Pokemon, but the beginning of our nightmare. In Generation 7, with the release of Pokemon Sun and Moon. But Incineroar's introduction to the world of competitive Pokemon was lackluster. In fact, despite the first year of Sun and Moon using a rule set of legal Pokemon that was very limited, allowing for a lot of creativity and Pokemon selection, Incineroar's usage was below 1%.
Let's see. Gen 7 is the one with Z moves, and from what I recall, Z moves were kind of broken. I don't know if that was the case for competitive, since I wasn't really in the competitive, like, I wasn't watching, like, any competitive stuff at that time. It's, anything, I want to say anything below, like, Sword and Shield tends to be where I tend to watch videos on the competitive scene, and I wasn't really around because I managed to buy my first ever console by myself. It was actually the 3DS XL new or whatever the heck that was, because I got my own co-op job, which means I got money to spend. So I finally got to buy consoles for myself instead of waiting for my parents or like begging my parents to buy things for me. And so my console before my 3DS XL new whatever the fuck was the SNES. And the Game Boy Advance I had because my cousin upgraded to the Game Boy Advance SP, and bro said, "Here you go." And I was like, "Thank you." Holy shit.
Now, I know what you're thinking. How could a Pokemon that performed so badly in its debut season possibly be the greatest Pokemon of all time? Wouldn't it be nice if that had been true? The thing is, when Incineroar was first released, it was missing something very important. But we'll get to that in a little bit. In the first year of Sun and Moon, there was basically no reason to use Incineroar because there was a better fire-type Pokemon, Arcanine. What made Arcanine so good was, in large part, its access to the ability Intimidate, one of the best competitive abilities of all time. The combination of Intimidate and good stats, with Fire's great defensive typing, would allow Arcanine to become the #1 most used Pokemon at the time. But this blissful period, okay, Sun and Moon weren't exactly blissful with Z-moves KOing Pokemon.
Okay.
Protect, but this
yeah, I know Z moves are broken and that kind of stuff. Okay, I was remembering correctly. And also there are like Nuzlocke rules where they're just like, yeah, don't use Z moves. They're broken. Too easy.
Okay, Sun and Moon weren't exactly blissful with Z-moves KOing Pokemon through Protect, but this relatively blissful period wouldn't last long. The cat couldn't be contained by a cage, and in early 2018, Pokemon made the biggest mistake of the entire franchise. Bigger even than putting this tree in Sword and Shield. They gave Incineroar Intimidate. This might not sound like a very big deal. It's not like Incineroar got a mega evolution or a new form. It just got access to an ability that isn't even all that rare. You can probably think of a couple pretty infamous Intimidate users right now. But unfortunately, even though it might not sound too imposing, this one change would forever alter the course of competitive Pokemon. Like I
Hold up.
This one change would forever alter the course of
Society if Incineroar didn't get Intimidate. Oh, he looks so happy. Rip, bro.
Competitive Pokemon. Like I said, Intimidate is arguably the best ability in the game. There's a couple reasons why. First, in Pokemon, almost all damaging moves are either physical attacks or special attacks. And typically, the balance between them is about 50-50. Intimidate lowers the physical attack of both opponents every time the user hits the field. After just a single Intimidate, a Pokemon's physical attack stat is 2/3 of its starting value. After a second Intimidate, that's down to 50%.
Yeah.
And these stat drops stick around until you switch your Pokemon out, making
I do like the
50%. And these stat
I do like the changes over here for displaying stat drops, just because back in my day, you just have to remember. Back in my day, you just have to remember which stats have been dropped and by how many stages. And now we have this, which is actually really, really nice.
drops stick around until you switch your Pokemon out, making them extremely annoying. So Incineroar went from a Pokemon that basically didn't have an ability to a Pokemon with one of the best abilities in the entire game. And in doing so, all of the latent tools in Incineroar's kit were suddenly activated.
Obliterate!
Incineroar. Incineroar's so stupid. I bet 6 Incineroar could beat any team. Maybe 5 Incineroar. I should remake that Lions video.
Intimidate is extremely strong, but not strong enough to let just any Intimidate Pokemon give me nightmares. Intimidate is on other Pokemon that nobody wants to use, like Masquerain, Mightyena, Granbull. Okay, I might have tried some of these at one point or another, but normal people wouldn't be interested in using them. What I'm trying to say is that there's...
That's always a Wolfie thing, though. It's just like, okay, so this Pokemon may be unused by literally everyone, but what if I used them? You know, I think that's really fun.
It's a battle, win or lose. It's the friends you make. Subscribe or you will lose. I'm small meeple. Bye.
Less Intimidate Pokemon that have been used than Intimidate Pokemon that haven't. So what makes some of these Pokemon better than others? And what makes Incineroar the best of them all? Well, when it comes to Intimidate, the ability becomes much more valuable the more often you're able to activate it during a battle. For a Pokemon like Mightyena, its base stats aren't high enough to allow it to repeatedly switch in without taking massive amounts of damage, even with Intimidate helping out.
Yeah, but Incineroar, I believe, he's probably going to talk about how it gets like Parting Shot. I like the animation for Parting Shot, though. It looks like Incineroar said swears, and then the other Pokemon gets offended, and then he just leaves.
A Pokemon like Masquerain is slightly tankier, but has many more weaknesses, meaning it's still a liability to switch in. Gyarados, on the other hand, has good defenses and only 2 weaknesses, and Arcanine is even tankier. So at least part of our answer has to do with how easy it is to switch in the Intimidate user. That's mostly a combination of a Pokemon's base stats and its typing. The better your Pokemon is defensively, the more frequently you can activate Intimidate during a battle. Remember how Arcanine was the #1 most used Pokemon in Sun and Moon's first competitive format, in large part due to its access to Intimidate? Well, why don't we compare the stats of Arcanine and Incineroar? When it comes to bulk, Incineroar is strictly better. With 5 more HP, 10 more defense, and 10 more special defense, Incineroar has a meaningful advantage over Arcanine.
Okay, yeah, okay, so the difference is mostly coming from the special attacking stat and also, I guess, the speed stat Incineroar kind of gives up. But overall, that's like really good considering the fact that Arcanine's base stat total is 555, and Stutters tend to like pivot around like the 525 to like 535 part. So like even though Incineroar has like less base stat, it's kind of nice to see that, I don't know, it still is better in some regards. But I like Arcanine though. It's a nice doggo.
In fact, Incineroar also has a higher attack stat. The only relevant stat where Arcanine has an advantage is its higher speed stat.
Yeah.
But Incineroar's lower speed stat is actually more useful here. Though I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's take a step back and think about what we're seeing here. Incineroar has strictly better stats than the #1 most used Pokemon.
Oh, it's so cute. Wait over here. The Arcanine over here in the corner.
In the format. Better than #1. And it has the exact same ability that enabled Arcanine to take the spotlight. Beginning to see why this might be a problem? Okay, but let's calm down. There is a key difference between Arcanine and Incineroar. Their typing is not the same. While Arcanine is a pure fire type Pokemon, Incineroar is both fire and dark. Surely having this extra type hurts more than it helps, right?
Well, Dark might, also have an immunity with it, and,
Right? Wrong. Incineroar's typing is pretty much a strict upgrade compared to Arcanine's. Both Arcanine and Incineroar are weak to rock, water, and ground attacks, but Incineroar is also weak to fighting moves. Being a dark type, however, has several benefits in exchange for this one additional weakness. First, Incineroar gains resistances to dark and ghost, with ghost being an especially difficult type to resist. This puts Incineroar's total resistances and immunities at 7, a stupidly high number for a non-steel type Pokemon. Second, Incineroar gains an immunity to psychic attacks. Immunities are incredibly valuable in competitive Pokemon, as they're one of the only ways to completely negate damage. And this was especially valuable in Sun and Moon because of the powerful psychic type Pokemon running around. Tapu Lele set up the psychic terrain with its ability and could output enormous amounts of damage, and the Pokemon Company then unleashed Ultra Necrozma, who had access to the signature Z move, Light That Burns My Eyes, a move with a whopping 200 base power.
Whenever I see that animation, I think of that one clip of a guy like begging his Robombi or something to like live that attack.
Incineroar being immune to these ridiculously strong attacks is just another absurd accomplishment on its resume. Being part Dark type has other benefits as well. Most notably, Dark type Pokemon are immune to attacks affected by the ability Prankster. Prankster is another of the best abilities in the game, and some of the most famous Pokemon in history make use of this powerful ability that gives non-damaging moves priority. Because the ability is so good, going into Sun and Moon, it was nerfed to no longer work on Dark type Pokemon. As a slight aside, because it's so cool, in the finals,
Yeah, that's where the nerf happened. I always forget when these like small little changes to abilities happen. Okay.
of the 2017 World Championships, a player used this mechanic change to completely block an opponent's Z move. Whimsicott was using the move Nature Power, a move that is classified as a non-damaging move because it transforms into a different move depending on where the player is and what effects are present on the battlefield. The reason Whimsicott used this move is because it was paired with both Tapu Fini and Tapu Koko, with Nature Power transforming into Moonblast if Misty Terrain was up, and Thunderbolt if Electric Terrain was up. And both Z moves could be accessed by holding the Normalium Z Crystal, because Nature Power is a normal move until it transforms. In other words, Whimsicott could use both Fairy and Electric Z moves by using Nature Power.
So Whimsicott has always been a menace. That's like awesome. That's the face of a menace.
In Game 3 of the finals of the World Championships, Whimsicott was staring down a Garchomp and saw an opportunity to take a KO by switching in Tapu Fini and launching the Z move for a surprise knockout. But the opponent predicted this and switched Garchomp into Mandibuzz, a Pokemon also weak to Fairy. But because Nature Power is a non-damaging move, it gets affected by Prankster and turns into a priority move, which is great, unless your opponent is a Dark type like Mandibuzz, because in that case, you will completely waste your once per battle Z move while also doing no damage. Anyway, as you can see, being immune
Wait, that's so smart. I love it.
to Dark type moves can make or break a battle, but there is a drawback to being a Dark type. Incineroar gains another weakness, to fighting. And of course, having more weaknesses is a bad thing, but not all weaknesses are created equally. Some types are just strictly better than others. You'd pretty much always rather be weak to Bug than to Fairy, for example. And while fighting type moves are always present in competitive
Yeah, I feel like for fighting moves, I'm trying to recall like maybe a special attacking fighting move, and the only one that comes to mind is really like something like Aura Sphere and that kind of shit. But I feel like, well, it's like fighting. You'd expect most of them to be physical, which would be affected by Intimidate, right?
Pokemon, they're rarely among the most common. And there's another reason why Incineroar's fighting weakness isn't actually that big of a deal. Nearly every relevant fighting type Pokemon is a physical attacker. This is partially because of how their stats are distributed, and partially because physical fighting type moves are far and away superior to special fighting type moves.
Yeah, we have Aura Sphere. Oh my god, Focus Miss. How could I forget?
And the reason these moves being physical is such a big deal is because of Intimidate. While taking a super effective attack means you're taking 2 times as much damage, if that attack is physical and has been reduced by Intimidate, you're effectively only taking 33% more damage, a much more manageable multiplier. And this doesn't just apply to Incineroar's fighting weakness, it's true of rock and ground type moves as well. While there are more special ground and rock type moves than fighting, the vast majority of times we see these types in competitive Pokemon, they're on physical attackers.
Yeah, I don't know if that has anything to do with the fact that fighting rock and ground, the free like physical special split, those types were always designated as like physical moves, right? So a lot of these moves,
while there are more
yeah, a lot of these moves, like I want to say Earthquake is like a really big one for ground types, like ground types for the longest time. Well, longest time, I mean until like Gen 4. All of it was considered physical, all rock type moves were considered physical, and well, all fighting was considered physical.
Special ground and rock type moves than fighting, The vast majority of times we see these types in competitive Pokemon, they're on physical attackers. So hitting Incineroar for actual meaningful super effective damage is a lot more difficult than it looks at first glance. The messed up thing is that Fire and Dark is such a good type combination, even not factoring in Intimidate. When I ranked every single type combination in the game, I put it at number 13 out of over 150. The fact that Intimidate just so happens to synergize incredibly well with it is just a fun little bonus. Today's video is sponsored.
Oh my god, a sponsor. Shmuel, you're like up. Come over here.
Wah! Hi everybody, it is Small Maple. I am here to watch the sponsored segments. Do not mind me, I was just doing construction work in the closet. Don't tell Big Maple. It's a secret.
Sponsored by Honkai Impact 3rd. It's a sci-fi adventure game developed by Hoyoverse. The game now has a 3D combat system and supports free jumping, which really enhances
I like jumping. I'm like really good at jumping. Why? I'm done.
gameplay. Players now can fight monsters and defeat bosses in the air, which, I mean, who doesn't love a little aerial combat? On top of that,
I have aerial combat, but you guys saw it, so I'm not showing it again.
players can climb onto the walls, which adds complexity to the battlefield. And
Walls? Wow, wait,
now players can
walls. Don't tell Big Maple I ate some drywall in the closet.
directly play Part 2. A brand new story, entirely new worlds, and new protagonists are available in Part 2, making it the perfect time to join for both new and returning players. Enhanced character modeling reveals more details than ever before, with more refined animation. There's also a new S-rank character called Senadina, not to mention
I think I should be in this game, trust.
other new characters like Coralie, Hylia, and Songkyu. You can
These are a lot of women. I like women because I'm a girl schmull.
even get Coralie for free. Plus, you can get one S-rank character and one outfit from Part 1. Download Honkai Impact 3rd now and use the redeem code TRIP2MARS to get tons of rewards. Thanks again to Honkai Impact 3rd.
Wait,
for
why are they in
sponsoring this
space?
Video. Of course,
Heck. Anyways, that's it, guys. Whoa, they're going to space, so shall I. Bye.
What? Oh, wait, hold up. Shmuel. I came back in the wrong outfit. Oh, fuck. I'm back, yeah. I'm back, yeah.
being able to switch in and intimidate down your opponent without taking too much damage isn't the only thing that makes a
Also, did Shmuel said she ate the drywall? Oh, fuck me.
Pokemon good. They need to be able to actually contribute to the battle after switching in, so they're not just dead weight. The easiest way to contribute to a battle is to deal damage. It's not rocket science. But Incineroar is a support Pokemon, so you'd think that doing damage wouldn't be its forte. And if you did think that, you'd be kind of right. Incineroar rarely looks like it's doing a Zacian impression. It's not going to be the Pokemon sweeping through your opponent's team. However, most support Pokemon really struggle to do damage, often because Pokemon that are bulkier tend to have worse offensive stats. Pokemon like Cresselia, Amoonguss, Whimsicott, Indeedee, Porygon 2, and more, at best are able to gradually chip down their opponents, contributing a little damage over time if you ignore them for too long. Incineroar, however, is built different. With an attack stat higher than Arcanine's, it's not a Pokemon you can afford to ignore. And with its fire-type move Flare Blitz's huge base power, Incineroar is capable of KOing many frail Pokemon in 2 hits, even without super effective damage. And that's not to mention that Flare Blitz also has a chance to burn. Isn't that fun? And if you can even believe it, Flare Blitz is the least problematic of Incineroar's moves. Incineroar also gets a signature Dark-type move called Darkest Lariat. Because yeah, why not give it a signature move?
Oh, wait. Ignores any chance of the target's oh. I didn't know it ignored defense and evasion. Oh, heck.
Darkest Lariat was used occasionally as it ignores defense boosts, but it wasn't normally
Oh, wait, that's a spinning Beyblade move. Oh.
Incineroar's Dark-type move of choice. That honor instead goes to Knockoff. This 65 base power move not only removes the item of any Pokemon it hits, it also becomes 50% stronger if the target is holding an item. After the damage boost, Knockoff is comparable in power to strong moves like Stone Edge.
Damn.
Except instead of, missing 20% of the time, it instead removes the item of whatever it hits. Knockoff means even in the situations where Incineroar isn't immediately threatening a ton of damage, it can still be a complete nuisance if you think you can ignore it. But Knockoff also isn't Incineroar's most problematic move. Now we get to talk about one of the best supporting moves of all time, Fake Out. Fake Out is a move with enough increased priority that it goes before almost all standard moves, and if it hits a target, it causes them to flinch, being unable to act for the turn. The catch is that Fake Out only works on the first turn after a Pokemon switches in. Fake Out is so strong because it allows players to control the pace of the battle. With Fake Out, you can use your partner to attack into a Pokemon that can't protect, or to buy yourself a turn to save a Pokemon that was under a lot of pressure. You can use it to temporarily invalidate a threat to let one of your other Pokemon set up. And you can even use the threat of Fake Out to scare your opponent into protecting, letting you switch out for free. You'll never be a—
I like Fake Out mind games a lot. Like, especially when I tried like competitive and that kind of stuff. It's like you always have to play the mind game of like, okay, I could fake out this Mon, but what if this is their like G-Max Mon and then suddenly Fake Out doesn't work anymore? Or it's like, okay, I could fake out this Mon, but what if I saw that there was a Zoroark on their team? Hisui and Zoroark on their team specifically, by the way, for me. And I'm like, what if I get bamboozled?
set to have Fake Out on your team since it offers such high value and is useful in virtually every matchup. Not to mention that Fake Out is one way for Incineroar to not be bothered by its lower speed stat, since it has such high priority. But the really cool thing is that Fake Out synergizes so well with Intimidate, since Intimidate and Fake Out both become active whenever Incineroar is switched in. As long as you can switch Incineroar out safely, you'll be able to access both Fake Out and Intimidate multiple times per battle.
So funny story about that. Bro has an ability like that. Well, not ability. A move.
Gee, it sure would be funny if Incineroar got some kind of, I don't know, specialized tool to let it switch out easier.
That'd be so...
Wouldn't that just be swell?
That would be so funny, bro. He's like so happy about it. Look at that.
It's finally time to talk about the stupidest move that they gave to Incineroar. U-turn. This bug type move does a little damage and then lets the user switch out. Even with every other thing the Pokemon Company gave to Incineroar, it still might have been manageable if they just hadn't given it U-turn. It's not that U-turn is some absurd damaging tool. It's weaker than Incineroar's other moves, and Bug isn't exactly a good type. What makes U-turn so broken is the ability to switch out after you hit something with it. Doing a little damage and switching out doesn't sound very exciting at first glance. After all, every Pokemon can switch out. But there is a key distinction here. U-turn lets you switch out after you attack. Normally, switching is one of the riskiest things you can do in a Pokemon battle. You're sacrificing your ability to do damage for the turn and bringing in a Pokemon who is completely vulnerable, unable to attack or protect. A bad switch can lose you the game if you let a key Pokemon take too much damage.
Yeah, I want to say that, like U-turn over here, I think this synergizes really well with, Incineroar's, like, low speed stat, right? I'm going to assume that's what he's gonna say next because that just makes sense to me.
The trade-off is that switching allows you to save a Pokemon currently in danger and bring out a Pokemon with a better matchup.
Yeah, so it's like because it's so slow, Incineroar can indeed tank a hit or something, do a little bit of chip damage, and then that Pokemon no longer has to worry about getting hit.
Overall, I'd say it's a really well-balanced mechanic. But Incineroar completely breaks it. Thanks to its low speed stat, Incineroar is able to move after your opponent has already attacked for the turn. And with U-turn, it's able to bring in one of your other Pokemon after your opponent has already attacked. This completely mitigates the drawback of switching in one of your Pokemon and allows Incineroar to switch itself out, resetting both Intimidate and Fake Out. This one inclusion in its move pool takes Incineroar from one of the best support Pokemon of all time to the very best.
You know, I was expecting him to mention Parting Shot here, but we're only like, what? We're like 2/3 of the way through the video. I'm sure it shows up eventually.
Everything in its kit synergizes so well together, and it has no obvious weaknesses. Incineroar was so good once it got Intimidate that it literally killed off one of the best Pokemon of all time, Landorus Therian. Just like Incineroar, Landorus gets access to Intimidate and U-Turn, but unlike Incineroar, it's better utilized as an offensive Pokemon. Because of this, Landorus has a much harder time making use of U-Turn as a defensive tool, using it instead as an offensive move to do damage to Grass and Psychic type Pokemon who can give it trouble otherwise. Ever since Incineroar's hit its stride, Landorus usage has plummeted, and Landorus has never won a World Championships while Incineroar has been legal. So now that you know what makes Incineroar so strong, let's go back to 2018 when Intimidate Incineroar was first introduced. At this point, players hadn't yet realized how good Incineroar was, and in part due to Landorus being a great Z-move user while Incineroar was mediocre with the mechanic. At the World Championships that year, Incineroar was second in usage to Landorus. However, despite being present on fewer teams than Landorus, Incineroar took every spot in the top 4 finishers, while Landorus was only present on 2 of those teams. Of course, Incineroar's great performance this year would be laughable compared to the utter domination it would show in 2019. The next year's format was the final format of Sun and Moon, and it featured a different rule set than 2018. The rule set is known as a restricted format, which means that players are allowed to use
Hold up, I'm covering like this entire side. I'll be down here for a little bit.
2 super powerful Pokemon on their teams. Now, you might expect Incineroar to do worse in a restricted format. After all, Pokemon like Groudon and Kyogre can much more easily deal damage to Incineroar, with Kyogre being one of the only Pokemon that can KO it in one hit. But here's the thing. The stronger the Pokemon are, the more valuable Intimidate is, the more valuable Fake Out is, and the more valuable being able to switch in one of your super powerful Pokemon for free is. Incineroar very quickly became the king. At the 2019 World Championships, Incineroar was present on over 83% of teams, the single highest usage of any Pokemon in the history of the game by a long shot.
You know, this kind of reminds me of like, I don't know, stats when I would hear things about like Yu-Gi-Oh and that kind of stuff, where it's like, oh yeah, this YCS, there was a 90% usage rate for like this one type of deck, and it seems like everywhere has that problem. There's always one thing that will always dominate. And that's meta for you, right? Incineroar is the guy.
In 2018,
that's why we're watching this video.
Landorus T was used on 61% of teams as the most used Pokemon in the tournament. For comparison, this kind of usage indicates that Incineroar wasn't just good, it wasn't even just great. It was nearly mandatory on every team at the top level. Its ability to do so many different things at once, combined with various tools against the super strong restricted Pokemon, meant you needed to have a really good reason to leave it off your team, a reason only a handful of players found. Oh yeah, we haven't even talked about how its dark typing this year was a total game changer, giving it a great matchup against new restricted Pokemon, Lunala, Solgaleo, and Ultra Necrozma. One thing that makes Incineroar so hard to deal with is the fact that it's a support Pokemon. When an offensive Pokemon is dominating tournaments, players can invest in more niche Pokemon that happen to have a good matchup against it, such as Bronzong to slow down Xerneas. The idea is, as long as your Pokemon is decent enough, if your opponent brings the threatening offensive Pokemon to the battle, they'll need to deal with your counter. And if they leave it behind, then they've just given up a lot of their offense and one of their more threatening tools. It's not like there isn't counterplay to Incineroar. Pokemon like competitive Milotic and Defiant Bisharp saw play in some formats.
Team balancing is always really interesting to hear about. Like weighing your pros and cons and seeing which Pokemon synergize with what and experimenting with new things like seems really interesting. I'd like to have the time to like maybe dabble in it, but like,
But the problem was nobody was relying on Incineroar for damage. They could afford to leave it behind if the opponent prepared too much for it, or keep it off the field until the threats were neutralized. Plus, these Pokemon that match up well into Incineroar tended to have a harder time when they weren't boosted by it, making them a liability at times. Ultimately, all the power was in the hands of the Incineroar player. But after Incineroar's dominance at the 2019 World Championships, there was at last a ray of hope. After 2 years being beaten down by Incineroar, players could see salvation. Sword and Shield. Pokemon doesn't get balance patches. Unlike games like Teamfight Tactics, which receive a balance patch every 2 weeks, or an emergency patch when something is really out of line, thank you Mort Dog, Pokemon at best receives balancing changes every 3 years when a new generation comes out. This was the light at the end of the tunnel. Surely the Pokemon Company would see how insanely broken Incineroar was and nerf it in some way.
Wrong, I bet.
Finally, we could find peace. They buffed it? One of the single largest buffs any Pokemon has ever received in the entire history of the game? Ah! Remember how we talked about how strong U-turn was? Well, the good news is that it's now mostly obsolete. The bad news is that that's because they gave Incineroar an upgraded version of it called Parting Shot.
Yeah! This is the one I expected him to mention earlier when he mentioned U-turn anyways, but I guess he was just building up to it.
This move is just like U-turn in that it switches the user out after it connects. However, unlike U-turn, which does a little damage, Parting Shot lowers both the attack and the special attack of whatever it hits. That's right, Incineroar can now double down on physical attackers and weaken special attackers, the only class of Pokemon it couldn't weaken before.
It's fucking disgusting. Pokemon Company hates his ass. Rip Wolfie, though.
Thanks, Pikachu. There was an attempt at balancing Incineroar. Certain old abilities were reworked to be immune to Intimidate, and Fake Out didn't work on Dynamax Pokemon because they couldn't flinch.
Yeah.
But the Pokemon who had these reworked abilities were across the board pretty mediocre, and the ability to weaken a Dynamax Pokemon's offenses with Intimidate and Parting Shot more than made up for the inability to flinch. We can't say too much about Incineroar's performance during the first 2 years of Pokemon Sword and Shield, as due to the pandemic, in-person major events were canceled. What we can say though is that of the 4 online events the Pokemon Company held to replace in-person events, called the Players' Cup 1 through 4, Incineroar won all 4. Every single one. Okay, to be fair, one of those was my fault, so yeah, my bad.
It's like, okay, to be fair, I was responsible for this. It's such a flex. Thumbs up.
But in 2022, in-person tournaments returned again with another restricted format.
Oh, I played this one a little bit. It was a lot of fun. This is like the only time I this is like the competitive part I talk about, just because this is the only time I was trained in competitive by my friend that actually goes to locals and that kind of stuff for this.
And Incineroar won every single major in the US, every single major in Europe except one where it finished second, every single major in Australia, nearly every single major in the rest of the world, all 3 international level tournaments, and the World Championships. Incineroar was used on 74% of all teams at the World Championships in 2022, finishing on 7 of the top 8 teams in the tournament. While this is technically lower usage than the World Championships in 2019, it's, in my opinion, just as impressive as even more Pokemon were viable in 2022 that hadn't been in 2019. So having Incineroar continue to be so mandatory on almost every team, despite the wider field, is an impressive feat.
Yeah, I tried, oh my god, I tried a Sun team for this one, and I remember asking, hey, why is this cat on on every single team I see? And then I think my friend replied with, so if you don't take this cat, you hate yourself. And I'm like, okay, okay, I will take this cat.
Mandatory on almost every team, despite the wider field, is an impressive feat. Which brings us to Scarlet and Violet, and in 2023, Incineroar was not in the game for the first year of competition. But just recently, Incineroar was added back into the game with the Indigo Disc DLC, which meant an opportunity for Pokemon to correct their mistake. After 2 generations and 5 years of complete Incineroar domination, surely this time they're gonna nerf it.
Well. The Pokemon Company is just so silly, guys. They're just so silly. They buffed Incineroar again. Ah!
They buffed it again? Are you kidding me? Okay, so this buff is smaller, but it is still a big deal. Incineroar was given Helping Hand, a move that goes before all other moves and powers up its partner's attack by a whopping 50%. This is an amazing move, and it's extremely valuable on a support Pokemon like Incineroar. However, they did add more counterplay this time around that has actually succeeded in slowing, not stopping Incineroar. First, 2 new items were added, Covert Cloak and Clear Amulet.
Oh.
Covert Cloak stops the secondary effects of moves, making Fake Out not flinch, while Clear Amulet prevents a Pokemon's stats from being lowered by Intimidate or Parting Shot. These items are massive, as is the fact that Inner Focus Pokemon
Yeah, because normally for the ability like Clear Amulet, you would need like an ability, I guess it's probably based off the ability like Clear Body and that kind of stuff. So having an item for that is really, really cool.
Intimidate or Parting Shot. These items are massive, as is the fact that Inner Focus Pokemon are stronger now than during Sword and Shield, in part due to their synergy with Chen Pao and the benefit they receive from terastallization. On top of the items, several new Pokemon were added with Anti-Incineroar abilities.
Only you can prevent the forest fires. Only you can prevent Incineroar from winning.
Dondozo has Oblivious, making it immune to Intimidate, and Kingambit and Annihilate are both Pokemon with Defiant, powering them up if any stat is dropped. Not to mention, Terra Ghost is a great defensive tool on fast and frail Pokemon to get around Fake Out in a pinch. And so it came to be that when Incineroar was finally added to the game, top competitive players were shocked to find it actually manageable. They started calling it Mid-Cineroar. YouTubers were making videos saying it was washed and that it fell off. And to a certain extent, I get it. We were used to a level of dominance from Incineroar that was unmatched by any other Pokemon. And with the new counterplay available, it finally felt like, well, just a good Pokemon. At the first tournament after Incineroar was added to the game, its performance was disappointing. Only 2 finishes in the entire top 8. Was this it? Was Incineroar finally brought back to Earth? Had the king been toppled from his throne?
Save himself from this one. The Flare Blitz from the Incineroar is going to deal so much damage to the Urshifu to put it on one last life. And with that attack, Wolf Glick becomes your Charlotte regional champion.
The
No
king
way.
is back, ladies and gentlemen.
Nope.
He did this! Alright, hi, yeah, gang. Anyways, that was a lot of fun. I always enjoy seeing like Wolfie put like random Incineroars in his videos just because we know he has like major PTSD. Like I want to say a love-hate relationship. Is this toxic? Does he have a toxic relationship with Incineroar? Yeah, probably. Anyways, that was a lot of fun. It was nice seeing the breakdown of Incineroar, like comparing what I already knew about it to just learning like when certain mechanics changed and that kind of stuff to make Incineroar actually kind of, you know, broken. Broken. Anyways, I will see you guys later. That's a lot of fun. I felt like maybe I yapped a bit too much, but it's fine. That's what React is for, right? Okay, bye everyone. I enjoy Kirby Music to Touch Grass too. That's like always in the recommendations, you know. Highly recommend the Kirby Music to Touch Grass. Also the DJ Pikachu full set. Around 32 minutes, by the way, in is that part slaps. Bye.